was left alone, she began to feel hungry. So she went to the cupboard and cut herself some bread, which she spread with butter. She gave some to Toto, and taking a pail from the self, she carried it down to the little brook and filled it with clear, sparkling water. Toto ran over to the trees and began to bark at the birds sitting there. Dorothy went to get him and saw such a delicious fruit hanging from the branches that she gathered some of it, finding it just what she wanted to help out her breakfast. Then she went back to the house, and having helped herself and Toto to a good drink of cool, clear water, she set about making ready for their journey to the City of Emeralds. Dorothy had only one dress, but that happened to be clean and was hanging on a peg beside her bed. It was gingham with the checks of white and blue, and although the blue was somewhat faded with many washings, it was still a pretty frock. The girl washed herself carefully, dressed herself in the clean gingham, and tied her pink sunbonnet to her head. She took a little basket and filled it with bread from the cupboard, laying a white cloth over top. Then she looked down at her feet and noticed how old and worn her shoes were. "It surely will never do for a long journey, Toto," she said, and Toto looked up into her face with his little black eyes and wagging his tail to show he knew what she meant. At the moment, Dorothy saw lying on the table the silver shoes that belonged to the Witch of the East. "I wonder if they'll fit me," she said to Toto. "They would be just the thing to take a long walk in, for they could not wear out." She took off her old leather shoes and tried on the silver ones, which fitted her as well as if they were made for her. Finally, she picked up her basket. "Come along, Toto," she said. "We will go to Emerald City and ask the Great Oz how to get back to Kansas again." She closed the door, locked it, and put the key carefully in the pocket of her dress. And so, with Toto trotting along somberly behind her, she started on her journey. There were several roads nearby, but it did not take her long enough to find one paved with yellow brick. Within a short time, she was walking briskly towards the Emerald City, her silver shoes tinkling merrily on the hard yellow roadbed. The sun shone bright and the birds sang sweetly, and Dorothy did not feel nearly as bad as you might think a little girl who had been suddenly whisked away from her own country and sat down in the midst of a strange land. She was surprised as she walked along to see how pretty the country was about her. There were neat fences on the side of the road, painted a dainty blue color, and beyond them were fields of green and vegetables in abundance. Evidently, the Munchkins were good farmers and able to raise large crops. Once in a while, she would pass the house, and the people came out to look at her and bowed low as she went by, for everyone she knew had been the means of destroying the wicked witch and setting them free from bondage. The houses of the Munchkins were odd-looking dwellings, for each was round with a big dome as a roof. All were painted blue, for in this country of the East, blue was the favorite color. Towards evening, when Dorothy was tired with her long walk and beginning to wonder where she would pass the night, she came to a house rather large than the rest. On the green lawn before it, many men and women were dancing. mouth painted on it to represent a face. An old pointed blue hat that had belonged to some munchkin was perched on its head, and the rest of the figure was a blue suit of clothes, worn and faded, which had also been stuffed with straw. On the feet were some old boots with blue tops, such as every man wore in this country, and the figure was raised above the stalks of corn by means of the pole stuck in its back. While Dorothy was looking earnestly into the queer painted face of the scarecrow, she was surprised to see one of its eyes slowly wink at her. She thought she must have mistaken it at first, for none of the scarecrows in Kansas ever wink, but presently the figure nodded its head to her in a friendly way. Then she climbed down from the fence and walked up to it, while Toto ran around the pole and barked. "Good day," said the scarecrow in a rather husky voice. "Did you speak?" asked the girl in wonder. "Certainly," answered the scarecrow. "How do you do?" "I'm pretty well, thank you," replied Dorothy politely. "How do you do?" "I'm not feeling well," said the scarecrow with a smile, "for it is very tedious being perched here night and day to scare away crows." "Can't you come down then?" said Dorothy. "No, for this pole is stuck up my back. If you will please take away the pole, I shall be greatly obliged to you." Dorothy reached up both arms and lifted the figure off the pole. For being stuffed with straw, it was quite light. "Thank you very much," said the scarecrow when he had been sat down on the ground. "I feel like a new man." Dorothy was puzzled, for it sounded queer to hear a stuffed man speak, and to see him bow and walk along her side. "Who are you?" asked the scarecrow when he had stretched himself and yawned. "And what are you doing?" "My name is Dorothy," said the girl. "I am going to Emerald City to ask the Great Oz to send me back to Kansas." "Where is Emerald City?" he inquired. "And who is Oz?" "Why, don't you know?" she returned in surprise. "No, indeed, I don't know anything, you see. I am stuffed, so I have no brains at all," he answered sadly. "Oh," said Dorothy, "I am awfully sorry for you. Do you think," he asked, "if I go to Emerald City with you, that Oz will give me some brains?" "I cannot tell you," she returned, "but you may come with me if you like. If Oz will not give you any brains, you will be no worse off than you are now." "This is true," said the scarecrow. "You see," he continued confidently, "I don't mind my legs and arms and body being stuffed because I cannot get hurt. If anyone treads on my toes or sticks a pin in me, it doesn't matter, and for I can't feel it, but I do not want people to call me a fool, and if my head stays stuffed with straw instead of brains, and yours is, how am I ever going to know anything?" "I understand how you feel," said the little girl, who was truly sorry for him. "If you will come with me, and I'll ask Oz to do what he can for you." "Thank you," he answered gratefully. They walked back to the road. Dorothy helped him over the fence, and they started along the path of yellow brick for the Emerald City. Toto did not like this addition to the party at first. He smelled around and sniffed a man as if he suspected there might be a nest of rats in the straw, and he often growled in an unfriendly way at the scarecrow. "Don't mind Toto," said Dorothy to her new friend. "He never bites." "Oh, I'm not afraid," replied the scarecrow. "He can't hurt the straw. Do let me carry that basket for you. I shall not mind it, for I can't get tired. I'll tell you a secret," he continued as he walked along. "There's one thing in this world that I'm afraid of." "What's that?" asked Dorothy. "The Munchkin farmer who made you." "No," answered the scarecrow. "It's a lighted match." Alright, so we're on chapter 4 now. After a few hours, the road began to be rough, and the walking grew so difficult that the scarecrow often stumbled over the yellow bricks, which were very uneven. once that this was true, so she only nodded and went on eating her bread. Tell me something about yourself and the country you came from, said the Scarecrow when she had finished her dinner. So she told him all about Kansas and how great everything was there and how the cyclone had carried her to this queer land of Oz. The Scarecrow listened carefully and said, I cannot understand why you would wish to leave this beautiful country and go back to the dry, gray place you call Kansas. That is because you have no brains, answered the girl. No matter how dreary or gray our homes are, we people of flesh and blood would rather live there than in any other country, be it ever so beautiful. There is no place like home. The Scarecrow sighed. Of course I cannot understand it, he said. If your heads were stuffed with straw, like mine, you would probably all live in beautiful places, and then Kansas would have no people at all. It is fortunate for Kansas that you have brains. Won't you tell me a story while we are resting? Asked the child. The Scarecrow looked at her reproachfully and answered, My life has been so short that I really know nothing whatever. I was only made a day before yesterday. What happened in the world before that time is all unknown to me. Luckily, when the farmer made my head, one of the first things he did was paint on my ears so all I heard was what was going on. There was another munchkin with him, and the first thing I heard was the farmer saying, How do you like those ears? They aren't straight, answered the other. Never mind, said the farmer. They are ears just the same, which was true enough. Now I'll make the eyes, said the farmer. So he painted my right eye, and as soon as it was finished, I found myself looking at him and at everything around me with a great deal of curiosity, for this was my first glimpse of the world. That's a rather pretty eye, remarked the munchkin, who was watching the farmer. Blue paint is just the color for the eyes. I think I'll make the other things a little bigger, said the farmer, and when the second eye was done, I could see much better than before. Then he made my nose and my mouth, but I did not speak because at that time I did not know what a mouth was for. I had the fun of watching them make my body and my arms and legs, and when they fastened on my head at last, I felt very proud, for I thought I was just as good a man as anyone. This fellow will scare the crows fast enough, said the farmer. He looks just like a man. Why, he is a man, said the other, and I quite agreed with him. The farmer carried me under his arm to the cornfield and set me up on a tall stick where you found me. He and his friends soon after walked away and left me alone. I did not like to be deserted this way, so I tried to walk after them, but my feet would not touch the ground, and I was forced to stay on the pole. It was a lonely life to lead, for I had nothing to think of, having been made such a little while before. Many crows and other birds flew into the cornfield, but as soon as they saw me, they flew away again, thinking I was a munchkin, and this pleased me and made me feel that I was quite an important person. By and by, an old crow flew near me, and after looking at me carefully, he perched on my shoulder and said, I wonder if that farmer thought to fool me in this clumsy manner. Any crow could see that you were only stuffed with straw. Then he hopped back down at my feet and ate all the corn he wanted. The other birds, seeing he was not harmed by me, came to eat the corn too, so in short time there was of them about me. I felt sad at this, for it showed I was not such a good scarecrow after all, but the old scarecrow comforted me, saying, if you only had brains in your head, you would be as good a man as any of them, and a better man than some of them. Brains are the only thing one is a crow or a man. After the crows had gone, I thought this over and decided I would try to get some brains. By any luck, you came along and pulled me off that stake, and from what you say, I'm sure that the Great Oz will give me brains as soon as we got to Emerald City. I hope so, said Dorothy earnestly, since you seem anxious to have them. Oh yes, I am anxious, returned the Scarecrow. It is such an uncomfortable feeling to know one is a fool. Well, said the little girl, let's go. And she handed him the basket to the Scarecrow. There were no fences at all by the roadside now, and the land was rough and untilled. Toward evening, they came to the great forest where the trees grew so big and close together that their branches never met the road of yellow brick. It was almost dark under the trees, for the branches shut out the daylight, but the travelers did not stop and went into the forest. If this road gives in, it must come out, said the Scarecrow. And as the Emerald City is at the other end of the road, we must go wherever it leads us. Anyone would know that, said Dorothy. Certainly this is why I know it, returned the Scarecrow. If it required brains to figure it out, I should have never said it. After an hour or so, the light faded away, and they found themselves stumbling along the darkness. Dorothy could not see at all, but Toto could, for some dogs see very well in the dark, and the Scarecrow declared he could see as well as the day, so she took a hold of his arm and managed to get along fairly well. If you see any houses or any place where we can pass the night, she said, you must tell me, for it is very uncomfortable walking in the dark. Soon after the Scarecrow stopped. I see a little cottage at the right of us, he said, built of logs and branches. Shall we go there? Yes, indeed, answered the child. I'm all tired out. So the Scarecrow led her through the trees until they reached the cottage, and Dorothy entered